What if we could learn from outstanding leaders in business, sports, and education from some of the best voices in corporate America? Lighting the Path is a series of interviews with industry leaders whose stories highlight strategies that build purpose-driven cultures, engage and retain top talent, develop drivers that create high-performance teams, and connect people to the vision of your company. Join us to hear from game-changing, talented leaders whose paths make a difference at work and at home.
When I think of strategies for tomorrow's leader, the name of this YouTube series and podcast that I do, this whole thing about strategies are needed because we're trying to lead people to some objective. A lot of times in a project that has to be implemented, a goal that has to be achieved. And I specifically invited today's guest, good friend of mine, Alana Hill, who I've known for a number of years now. I actually walked alongside of her as members of the National Speakers Association. Matter of fact, she kind of went out in front of me as the president of the association. And then she was a good recruiter because she reached back and said, "Hey, Mike, why don't you get in the saddle too?" And so I followed her. But I wanted her to spend time with us today because she is a project management expert. And I use the word expert specifically because she spends a tremendous time in that space. Second reason I want to spend time with her is because she falls in a very rare category, very rare position. As an African-American woman, Texas A&M Aggie engineer. And there are very few people in the world who can use all those words in the same sentence. And she can. And the way she was able to accomplish that, she had to knock down barriers throughout her entire walk, really in her entire life. And I want us to spend some time today talking about what does it take to be able to move through, past, over, around situations when we're trying to make something happen that is part of our responsibility at work or at home. And so, Lana, it's great to visit with you.
Great. Glad to be here. Thanks, Mike.
Super. The other thing is that I want to throw this up front is that she is also an author. You've actually written 3 books. And that's part of one of the ways you and I met was because we were on a book mastermind group that was involved with that. And I got a chance to really see. Yeah, I got a chance to do the mind and the heart work or whatever. So I got a question for right from the very beginning. I'm just kind of curious because I've never asked you this. What drew you to be an engineer? Because that is very much a male, it has been historically, I don't know if it's still today, very male-dominated space. But you were drawn in that. Tell me why.
I guess it's interesting about it being a male-dominated space. I was the kid who, wanted to play with her Barbies and play football. So when we think about, what's gender normative, what those norms are, I was just as eager to go, play with my brother as I was, girlfriends down the street. And I think that prepared me socially from a socialization standpoint. When you're the 10-year-old girl that will take down the biggest boy on the street because you're just not afraid of him. I think that kind of grit that I formulated early on in life, just, and that defiance is really the word that I've really been adopting. I've just been naturally defiant against obstacles and against norms. And, when I was pursuing, when I was looking to see what I wanted to major in, I was looking at medical school because, I'm good in math and science. And, I graduated from an underserved school. And so I didn't know what an engineer was. I couldn't just, interview my friends' parents and find out what an engineer was. So I actually went into the field rather blind. I didn't know what to fully expect. I just knew it would be a great place to apply my love of science and math to some extent. That's always a funny joke. But certainly physical sciences, physics, I love that. Logic. And so it drew me to it. And then the fact that it was male dominated, I was just like, game on.
Yeah, you just fought your way through it. I think today the acronym that we use in that space is STEM. A lot. And so what have you seen in both personal experience and observation with others? What does it take to not just compete, but literally to excel if you're pursuing something in that science, technology, engineering, mathematics arena?
Well, one thing, certainly high acumen for scientific logic, the scientific method, the the linear if then, the ability to solve problems. I know when I used to recruit right out of college and I would recruit young engineers, I would tell them, I'm looking to hire you for your problem solving skills, and we'll fill in the gap for proprietary information. But what is your ability to solve problems and critical thinking and to investigate, because that is really what science is about. It's about observation and investigation, and then drawing a hypothesis and proving it true or false. If you've ever spent any time around science fairs, which I absolutely love. If I have no time on my hands, I'm at a science fair. I
That's
love
right.
watching kids solve problems, even drawing conclusions and connecting dots. So it's really embracing that and being so consciously curious about the world around you, about how things work, and and then wanting to be the innovator that can make things work better. And that's really what engineering is all about.
Yeah, I love this word you're using about curiosity, because a lot of times we get our value, our sense of sort of self-worth out of what we know.
Mm-hmm.
And what you're making me think about is to excel in this space that you call home. It really takes a sense of curiosity, doesn't it? Of what is it you don't know, or what's behind door number one, or what's around the corner, uh, to be able to come up with ideas and processes, because engineering is literally about solving problems, isn't it?
It is. And it's interesting when we talk about curiosity, that's what led me into my work in change leadership, and the curiosity that it takes to really lead change in yourself and in others, because there's no change in the comfort zone. And when we talk about science, when we talk about innovation, it's not about the status quo. It's not about what we have now. It's not about what we're comfortable with. So whether that's from a professional, solutions provider, or personally, solving problems. I decided, it's cool weather. I wanted to go for a run this morning, and I'm a woman of a certain age and got a few miles on my knees and hips, and I had to solve the problem. I had to pull out my foam roller and a few other things to be able to get me out the door. So it's being in a mode where problems don't stop you. They actually encourage you to figure it out, just to figure it
Mm,
out.
yeah, I was talking to one of our other guests before, and they talked about the number one trait that leads to success more than any others is resilience.
Absolutely.
It's the ability to push their way through. And in order to have resilience, you're talking about the need for change, not around you, but you started talking about change. You just talked about changing yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm kind of curious, is when you look back on your life and who Alana Hill is today, other than achy knees, what anything in particular about you that you had to go through changes to increase your ability to be productive and excel?
Yeah, I would say that I love that at my core, I'm still a fun, outgoing nerd. I mean, that is who I am innately. Wherever you go, there you are. But I love that through that, the evolution of me is someone who, while resilience is a very big part of my story, as you mentioned, being an African American female engineer, who did that against all odds socioeconomically, as well as lack of support, et cetera. But aside from that, that evolution has really been about, focus. It's been about, when we think of resilience, oftentimes people will reflect on maybe a time that they got back up, but the reality is it's the times you keep getting back up, and that's where resilience is about. It's how we keep getting back up. It's not enough to do it once or even twice. And so I would say that that's been a big differentiator for me, and something that I've seen grow and develop. And especially as I incorporate more emotional intelligence around that, is understanding that, because things that are strong that rebound are typically rugged. And what we want is to be resilient without the ruggedization that can come from that, without the hardening, without the callousness that can come from miles on your feet, right? So it's really balancing the strength that it takes to recover, as well as the sensitivity, the empathy for yourself and for others, as you continue to overcome challenges and support others as they overcome challenges.
Yeah, I love that part about supporting others, because especially when you think about it from a leader's standpoint, if you look at the change in what an effective leader was, you go back, one generation, leadership was about pretty autocratic, almost, somewhat dictatorial. It's like, I tell you to do this, go do this, and today, that type of leadership style, that type of, leading by intensity, as opposed to, you use the word emotional intelligence. Somebody was recently talked about the biggest mark of EQ, of emotional intelligence, is being able to see something through somebody else's perspective. That's the driving force that your EQ scores up when you step into that space. You've had to learn that, haven't you, in your walk, to be able to see something through someone else's perspective, so that you could figure out, how do you move forward?
You can't support people with your own mindset and your own methodologies. It's really about what's going to be most effective for them. How do you take into account their situation, their perspective, their gifts, their wiring? And so it's really about that other-centeredness when we talk about leadership, as you mentioned, because you're not leading yourself. You're not looking in the mirror saying, "Hey, you go do it." You're looking at someone who's innately often very different from you, even if on the physical they seem the same. They are internally very different, and that's the key thing. I remember hearing someone say that in marriage class, that when you can just wake up in the morning and just say, "You know what, I'm not married to me," right? Your spouse is not you. I mean, what a game changer that is in any relationship, when we remember that the people that we're in relationship with, they're not us. They have different needs, wants, desires, ideas, and that's what makes it beautiful.
Very much so. And so when you take this, because of tell the audience about your journey from a project management standpoint, because you literally travel the country, travel the world, teaching project management processes, systems, how to drive initiatives or what have you. Tell us a little bit about the work that you do in that space.
So the work that I do these days are really around the leadership skills and capabilities to be an effective project manager, an effective project leader. And it's interesting when we talk about project management. I actually just returned from the Project Management Institute, which is our big global association. We had our national conference. And one of the things that we did years ago was establish, from a talent development standpoint, what are the skills that are necessary for a successful project leader. And these have evolved a little bit over the years, but at the end of the day, one big part of that is the ability to lead others. It's empathy, it's communication, it's how you effectively delegate, how you effectively support your team members, and how you effectively leverage emotions to drive change. All becoming more and more wrapped up, because the reality is, if you build it, they won't come. So it's not only effective, important when you're leading your team, but also with your stakeholders. And so I do a lot of the work that I do is helping project managers understand how to engage stakeholders, which are often with their team members, as well as others who are going to be impacted by the project, because projects by their nature create change. So you can't just go around slapping projects on the board and figuring that people are just going to come sign up for them. How do you persuade, influence, encourage, etc.? And so my journey to that has actually been quite exciting. As you mentioned, I've had the opportunity to travel the world. Thus, the theme for my office here, the headquarters of Two Hill Consulting Services, the international organization founded in an understanding of global cultures, because that is a competency that you must have in modern project management. And I've had the opportunity to deliver workshops, all over the world, and on 6 continents. 5 continents. I'm sorry, I haven't been to Australia, and I've yet to go to Antarctica, and I don't think I will.
That's right. Yeah, go down and speak to the polar bears or whatever they have down there. So.
Right. Yeah. I do want to go visit those dwindling penguins, though. That breaks my heart.
Yep, very much so. Then, so you mentioned something, Lana, that it's one of my favorite subjects, especially talking to people from either a leadership standpoint or from a technology standpoint. That's the word emotions, because this word about emotions sometimes get a really bad rap. we call them soft skills, right? And it's one of my previous guests talks about is the word soft skills is the worst label that we've ever put on anything, because there is nothing soft about dealing with people whenever there's pain, suffering, conflict going on, trying to navigate difficult conversations. It literally takes a master of self-management in order to be able to help manage others. With the work that you've done with helping people to put project plans in place and to be able to grow as their capacity to be able to drive projects, how do you work with leaders to do a better job of bringing the emotional impact of things whenever emotions supposedly, which is wrong, don't fit into business?
Well, first, I love being part of the movement, if you will, to rebrand soft skills, as you just mentioned. And the rebranding is their essential skills. They're essential for effectiveness at work and at home. When I'm opening a workshop, I instruct my participants that I'm going to help you to be more effective at work and at Walmart. I mean, how much better would checking
good
out
alliteration.
Walmart
I like that. Work in Walmart.
Yes. And because these skills transcend the workplace and they transcend home. We realize too, with more work-life blend, we see the benefit of gaining and gathering skills that help us to be effective in these key areas. I mean, I think you could sit with anyone who's a professional with a family, and they would rate their family over their profession, but they're not throwing their profession in the trash can. It's not like it doesn't matter. So it matters. It matters so much. And when we know that something matters, then we have to be intentional. And that intentionality becomes really important around how we, regardless of what we call it, because I know as I began to transition into this workspace, emotional intelligence Daniel Goleman's works had been published and they were just starting to come about, but they hadn't really caught on. Because like you were saying, I had to be careful of saying emotions, especially in very knowledge worker based environments, which is where I work primarily with, engineers, attorneys, people of a very high IQ, high acumen, and making sure that they understood that, well, it's not that you have to hug everybody when they walk into the door. We could talk about how else we express our emotions, but it's really about making sure that we leverage our emotions, because, and I think the really key help for that is when we acknowledge that emotions are data and our emotions tell us something. And any good scientist, any good technologist, any good project manager does not ignore data. And with that foundational principle, we don't ignore data, we action it. What is it telling us to do?
Yeah, very much so. And I'm really bummed right now, because when you said that emotions are data, I thought I came up with that, because I just use that I just could use that with a client that is real, very data driven, very tech, and it's doesn't that's they go to that side, and it was really fun watching the look on her face when I was talking about that. You do realize that emotions are data. What do you mean? There's a story behind the emotion. It's whatever emotion you're seeing. There's something that's impacting it, maybe causing it, maybe accelerating it. And so when you look at that and go and start asking your questions, I wonder what's happening here. It changes as a leader, because now you're moving it away from you and are looking at it again from their perspective. And so I love what you're talking about, that this whole thing about especially essential skills, because you're right, is that for a leader to be effective, and let's broaden this out, and let's define what leader is. In my language, leader is somebody who influences. Mm-hmm. That's what leader is. And so, because that means it doesn't matter how many people are reporting up into me, because somebody who has no one reporting into is still a leader because they have the ability to influence, right? And so when you think about that, is that somebody's role in a project situation is to influence the outcome, to be able to move the ball, as we keep talking about. What are there any particular sort of obstacles that you've watched that I'm not calling them a repeating pattern, but it's just some of the ones that you have to really spend time helping the people that you consult with, or work with, help them sort of navigate because they're just common.
One, as we were talking, as we kind of started off, it's really obvious looking at me. I'm an African American woman, educated at Texas A&M University in petroleum engineering. So I went into the energy
Hang on a
industry.
second. Am I supposed to say whoop here? I'm not sure. I just want
I whooped when you said it earlier. So yes, feel free to whoop, although Aggies might come get you because it is something that only we are supposed
I
to
know,
do.
but it's like my daughter graduated,
Okay.
and but
Oh, that's right. That's right.
I
You're
have
an
two
Aggie fan.
daughters graduated. I have two Aggies in the family, so
Oh, there you
I'm
go.
an
Whoop
Aggie by
on.
I'm
Yes,
Aggie by
please.
proxy. Although my
Yes.
daughter did say, Mike, you need to work on this. Should Dad work on that because you're not saying it quite right? I'm not sure
You
what
are
she means
supposed to
by
whoop
that.
on. Yes, whoop,
Okay.
get your whoop on. But so one of the obstacles that I had to overcome starting in college was being discounted as a woman in the profession, as an African American in the profession. Having two dimensions of marginalization um, can be for some diminishing, and there were times when it was, for me even personally, where I would internalize that. But the reality was I would kind of go back to that sand lot and that football field, and I'm taking people out at the knees, and realizing that no, when I stand in my power, when I stand in my confidence, in my competence, because that's what happens if we can stand in the confidence of our competence. That no, I know this answer, no, I know this, and you will listen when I speak up, or excuse me, I'm speaking, becomes one of the biggest obstacles for women in engineering, and that hasn't it's improved, but it certainly hasn't gone away.
No.
The idea of being discounted and being undervalued, and then having to exert the energy, because the reality is, as much as I could stand in my powers, it takes energy to do that.
Mm-hmm.
And when we put two people side by side, and if one has to expend energy to be heard and the other one just naturally gets to be heard, which one is the most emotionally exhausted at the end of the day? And so when we look at the statistics about burnout and women leaving the workforce and things like that, so much of that comes from, the energy and the emotional tax of having to assert yourself, when what should have happened is you should have been invited into the conversation. And so one of the things that I'm really passionate about is making sure that while I work and support women in standing in their power, I work, support, and edify men in how to be the invitation givers, and how to be the one that says, what is it? What do you think? What do you think? What do you think? Helping them to be more collaborative, because men most often, especially senior leader men, when we talk generations, they were not socialized to be collaborative. So it's really helping in some ways remediate those skills, because when we look at who our decision makers are in organizations, they were socialized differently. And so to lead in the modern workforce and to be collaborative and to be a team lead, they need inclusive, mindset and skills that go along with that. They need an understanding of some behavioral science so that they can, work equitably towards ensuring that there are contributions from all of their valued talent. Tell my clients, you spend good money recruiting people, bringing them in, make that a wise investment.
Thanks for joining us today on Lighting the Path, Strategies for Tomorrow's Leaders. If anything in this podcast speaks to you, if I've challenged you, or if you want to spend time digging into this subject a little deeper, or if you disagree with me, reach out. My contact information is on our website, lightingthepath.net, or email me at mike@mikelejeune.com. Also, look for me on LinkedIn. I'd love to connect our networks. Keep lighting the path for those who choose to follow you. It's more than a responsibility. It's an honor.